Next, we are delighted to welcome to our summit Kevin Young. Kevin is the head of audience at The Economist, and he will share with us how The Economist boosted referrals from social media by 180% in only 6 months and achieved phenomenal growth on Instagram, which is increasingly becoming a new source for younger audiences. So stay tuned, and back to you, Kevin.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Hello from a sunny London. So hello, I just wanted to introduce myself really to start with. My name is Kevin. I used to be a journalist at Bloomberg and the BBC. I worked on radio, on online, and on social media. And about 18 months ago, I joined The Economist as the head of social media. And over the past few months, my role has expanded to become head of audience. So that means we are not just looking at social media in our department, but also covering newsletters, SEO, push alerts, all sorts of other audience engagement tools. I'm going to focus on social mostly this morning, though. And I'm very happy to take questions on all of this later on. I just wanted to start off by explaining what The Economist is. I hope you've all heard of it. We've been around since 1843, and we're one of the oldest, we would say, newspapers in the world. Some people would call us a magazine, but we say newspaper because our agenda is very much that of a regular news publication. We are a prestigious brand, and we have about 50 million followers on social overall. I would say a couple of years ago, one of the goals might have been to get to, say, 100 million. But now we're focusing on quality rather than quantity, and we want to do better at reaching those 50 million and a subset of those whom we can turn into long-term subscribers and readers, and people who will not just see us flow past on their news feeds, but who will really engage with us. We focus on 4 main platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We're known for having some fantastic engagement projects, particularly around our data journalism. We also have beautiful documentaries and lots of podcasts, which are of an enormously high quality. And we have a real understanding of what's going on in the world. We are never usually the first to talk about breaking news. We take a little bit longer to write our articles, but that is because we have unique insight and analysis that brings a completely different perspective on a story to people. So through our website, we're able to bring journalism every single day to people with new articles published between issues. And then on a Thursday afternoon, we have a big drop of about 60 to 70 articles, which is everything from that week's newspaper. Looking at our social operations in particular, what we wanted to do was to increase referrals without dumbing down or turning to clickbait. The Economist likes to keep it classy, and we wanted to make sure that we could find ways to increase our presence and our engagement on social media, but not resort to tactics that might bring our brand into disrepute. So, as I said, we were looking to form long-term relationships with what we might describe as quality audiences who would come back again and again. And within that, we wanted to also find the next generation of subscribers who would be with us for a long time. We decided to take a customized approach to each platform. So we were looking at the 4 main platforms and working out what we would do on each of them. And also we have a fantastic data analyst who's set up some very, very insightful dashboards, which give us unique insight into how our journalism is doing, not just in terms of referrals, but how our stories are doing amongst the most highly engaged set of subscribers, and also which articles are generating the most subscriptions. And we wanted to use that data in our decision-making processes a lot more. To look at the 4 platforms briefly, individually, we wanted to treat Twitter a little bit like a radio station. You might think that if you listen to your favorite pop music station, you hear the same songs over and over and over again. Well, there's a reason for that. That's because people don't listen for that long in the day, and they want to make sure that everybody hears something that they like in the short period that they're tuned in. Well, Twitter, although I'm sure there are some super users amongst those of us who are listening today, most people dip in and out of Twitter every day. So by having a higher retention presentation of our best journalism and also upping the greatest hits, a bit like a radio station, we can make sure that people had a lot of quality content to look at whenever they tuned in or switched on, if you like, to Twitter. On Facebook, we took the opposite approach. We decided not to put absolutely everything we did on the platform. I'm sure, again, a lot of you will be familiar with the Facebook algorithm, which is famously touchy and doesn't like you to put the same article up more than once every 24 hours. It has all sorts of other dark arts going on behind the scenes. So we decided that we would cut back the number of posts we put on Facebook, but the ones that we included would be the really, really good ones that would generate engagement. Instagram, we wanted to turn from a photo-led account into what we'd call a shop window for the best visual content, and I'm going to have a bit of a deep dive into that in a few minutes. And then LinkedIn, we took a more conversational approach to that platform. We had an innovative posting strategy as well, which is that we have matched up our Instagram posting strategy with our LinkedIn posting strategy. That means that we have about 8 posts a day on both platforms, and there's a big overlap in content in terms of captions, in terms of story choice, and in terms of the way that we're presenting our journalism. I'll go into a little bit more detail on that in a few minutes. But in the process of doing this, we wanted to have a look at our graphics and the way that we present our journalism and make sure that everything had a consistent feel across the 4 platforms we were working on. And we're very, very fortunate that we have some incredibly talented colleagues. They are graphic designers, they make films, they make radio, as well as the journalists around the world who are producing this world-class journalism every single week. And we decided to take a bit of a crowdsourcing approach to get everybody to chip in on social and to help to lift our output and come up with new ideas. And that was really, really important. How we saw success, well, as we were saying a few minutes ago, social referrals leapt by 180% in 6 months, going up to an all-time high. We'll talk a bit more about how we did that in just a second. The proportion of visits from social media to our website went up significantly to just over a third. Facebook is our biggest social source in terms of referrals, but Twitter is hugely important and influential. You'll know that it only takes one influential person to retweet you or share an article, and your traffic can go absolutely crazy. And as the news platform, we want to keep super serving that. But what we found by introducing a link in bio functionality on Instagram was that we could generate traffic from that platform and bring new people to our website. And we actually have brought Instagram up to the same level as LinkedIn in terms of the number of referrals that we receive each month. We did that by adding the ability to click through to articles on Instagram, but we also managed to halve our posting frequency on LinkedIn while not losing traffic. So you'll remember that I said we synchronized our Instagram and LinkedIn posting strategy. So we had about 8 posts a day on each. We managed to have an approach that was more conversational, friendly, chatty, encouraging people to comment and share articles. And by going down from about 16 LinkedIn articles, 16 LinkedIn posts a day, which were mostly like an RSS feed, to having 8 conversational LinkedIn posts every day, we managed to keep the same level of referrals. I think we look absolutely stunning on social media. I'm going to do a bit of a deep dive into Instagram now, and very happy to take questions about all of this. And as you can see from these screenshots, our Instagram feed looks a little bit different to other people's Instagram feeds. We really focus on our graphics and our data journalism. We have illustrators who previously, before we took a new approach to this, were producing beautiful work that was seen in print and on our website, but was not really being used on social media. So we've made sure that we can include some of those illustrations and animations on our social feeds. We also use Instagram stories to try and bring a lot of our journalism to life. And we still use photos. We use them in different ways. The photo that you can see in the middle of the turtle was to show that we have a sense of humor as well. I think that's very important in these troubled times. A lot of people have had a very, very tough year, and sometimes you just need to be able to laugh. But you'll see from the left-hand screen, and I will go into more examples of these, that we have used photography and words on the photos to try and stand out in people's feeds. And you have to try and picture how people are using social platforms. Instagram is a platform where people are mostly on their phones. There aren't that many web users, and they have an enormous amount of choice. They're scrolling through. You have 1 or 2 seconds at most to try and grab someone's attention, to stop them from scrolling on, to make them read your caption. And if you think about it, the process of clicking through with link in bio is very, very complex. You are hoping that somebody will look at your post, will realize that the picture or the headline on the post is interesting, then start to read the caption, expand the caption if they want to know more, then go to your homepage, your profile page, then click the link in bio, and then press the corresponding thumbnail to go through to your website. So you really have to stand out if you want to get someone to engage with you. And on a platform that's full of people's photos of beautiful sunsets and babies and pizzas and everything else that we're doing in life, I think that we found a way to help people see that ours is different. Our material is worth a few seconds of their time, and that actually if they start to read and look into more detail at what we're doing, they will want to engage with The Economist for the long term. So let's examine Instagram specifically then. 2/3 of our followers are aged between 18 and 34. So we have a community of about 5 million on that platform. And that means that more than 3 million 18 to 34-year-olds have a relationship with The Economist. And they are the next generation, right? They are the people that we want to bring into our world and make them subscribe, to register on our website, to engage with us on social media, and to become the people that we're still looking to in 10 or 20 or 30 years' time to be loyal Economist readers. Instagram, therefore, is a good way to reach these new audiences. And this is a stunning stat that I couldn't quite believe when I saw it. But it's true, we've checked. Our followers are opening the Instagram app about 35 times every day on average. Now, I can imagine before the lockdown and before everything went a bit strange, this would be because, I don't know, you were waiting for something. You were waiting for a train, waiting for a coffee, waiting to be served somewhere. Or maybe you were firing this up on the sofa as you watch TV at night. Instagram is an app that people tend to engage with while they're doing something else. And they want a distraction. They want something really, really good to look at, even if it's just for a few seconds. And then they move on to the next thing. So we increased the number of posts that we present on Instagram every day to make sure there was a higher chance that when people were logging into the app, they would see something from The Economist that they could engage with. Having said that, though, Instagram is still the smallest of the 4 platforms that we deal with, and it's very, very labor intensive. So 5 million is a wonderful number, and we want to increase that. We see opportunities to engage with new audiences on Instagram, as I've said, but that's still lower than any of the other 3 platforms that we've been talking about. And it takes a lot of time to make content this beautiful. We have graphic designers who might spend several days perfecting an Instagram story in addition to doing all of their other work around the newsroom. And when we turn articles and photos into templates, that is something that needs to be checked very carefully. We need to make sure we get the tone right, and we need to not misrepresent anything that we're talking about. So we have to find ways to be efficient and to make sure that the material we use on Instagram is also seen on our other accounts. But we need to make sure that we stand out on this platform in the first place. So I mentioned that our account was previously a photo-led account. We would use pictures from news agencies rather than our own content. So this meant that a lot of the posts that you could see on The Economist were also seen on the Getty Images Instagram account, or AP or others. And that was really good for what it was doing. And at that time, that was how Instagram was being used. But we noticed a subtle shift that other organizations were using charts and data. They were also going into more detail about their journalism by picking out quotes or going into depth with videos. And even things like audiograms were coming around to show off podcasts and to get people to engage with different kinds of media. And so that is what we've done with our account. You can see the list of things here. We devised new templates for our pictures. We found ways to bring our data to life. And we took some of the content that was already in the building and was being used in other places, and we used it on social media. Just a few examples then of how we find things work on Instagram for us. This may or may not be how they work for you, and you may try these and they don't work, or you may try another method and it's more successful. But we find that when using photos, that words can make images more interesting. There are a lot of men wearing suits in the world of business and politics, right? And you could see men in suits having their photos taken every single day on articles that are relevant to us. So we want to make sure we don't have as many images that are similar to one another, and that we have a distinctive output. And by using simple language and putting headlines that are perhaps away from the text and aren't kind of running over people's faces or getting in the way of other things, that this is a very good way to grab people's attention. And also, we have a global audience, not everybody speaks English. So if we can keep some of the language really short and sharp, then that will help them to understand a bit more about the article. With charts and data, we have some beautiful visual data journalism. We have a very talented team that prepares this. And what they did was they come up with a whole new template to put these into a square format. We have the red headlines. We are quite in favor of removing elements of charts so that they're not quite as complicated. And in the one on the screen grab here, you can see that we've used color and we've used faint lines and darker lines to illustrate the points that we were trying to make. And the reason for that is that, again, you still only have 1 or 2 seconds to grab people's attention when this is scrolling past on their telephones. So you need to try and hook them in with a headline that makes sense and is simple to understand. And then in your caption, you should talk a little bit more about it. Don't run a chart that then doesn't have any reference to what's in the chart in the caption. And of course, the magic ingredient is that you have to leave enough to the imagination that people will still then want to click through to the link in bio and go onto your website to read the whole story. On quotes, again, we try to keep the words and the pictures away from one another. We try to keep them simple and easy to understand. And sometimes we use carousels, so, like a slideshow, to give a variety of views. But the idea of sticking to one idea per slide or one idea per post is probably quite a good one. Again, you're competing for people's attention. There's a lot of choice for them. And if they're not very hooked by your content and they're not very interested, or it's just too complicated for them to understand, they'll move on and they won't even bother trying to read the caption or learn more about what you're trying to say. So one idea per slide can help you as well. On video and audio, we went through a phase where we tried producing 60-second cut downs of our documentaries for social. But what we decided was that actually it was far more effective, and the numbers showed that it was effective, to run the documentaries in their entirety. So these are between 6 and 12 minutes long, usually. They go into detail about a particular subject, and sometimes it's very, very hard to find a minute where you can accurately represent everything that's going on. So we use IGTV and YouTube as a way to promote our long-form films and explainers. And the preview, the thumbnail of IGTV videos and the newsfeed helps to drive a lot of the views to these clips. And audiograms, we have a whole new design for these. If you don't know the word audiogram, it's basically where you see the sound wave bouncing up and down and the subtitles explain what's going on. And that is a great way to promote Economist Radio and the podcast that we're creating every day. And then finally, Instagram stories. Ours look a little bit different. The Economist is an organization that doesn't have what we call bylines. It doesn't have a lot of journalists who are out there as in high profile and reporters who are on TV all the time and who are using their phones to report the news. We have a more considered approach to our journalism. And so our Instagram stories, rather than being first person sequences, usually go into detail about our articles using graphics or very, very careful designs. And sometimes we find it's very effective to use native tools such as the Q&A or polling functions that you can see here to engage with our audience. But understanding how your followers want to use Instagram stories is very important, so that you're giving them what they want and you're making sure that you generate engagement and don't spend a long time producing something that looks beautiful but which nobody is engaging with. And then my final point on Instagram before I wrap up is to talk about the efficiency to make sure that you are using your content elsewhere. This is an article from about a year ago, which was talking about the most livable cities in the world. It was a study that's completed annually by our colleagues at the Economist Intelligence Unit. And you can see here that we used a mix of graphics, videos, Twitter threads, and LinkedIn posts to try and engage with people. And this was all content that we were able to share across multiple platforms. We used it primarily for Instagram, but then we were able to increase engagement on other platforms as a result. So I'll conclude with my 5 tips for social success, and I hope that these make sense and sum up some of the things that I've been talking about. First of all, find your USP or your unique selling point and then shout about it. You don't have to be everything to everybody. So if you want to aim for a certain audience or you want to specialize on a certain topic so that you stand out, then be bold, own that, go with it, and make sure that people understand what you're about. Number 2 is to treat social as your shop window. So to present the best of your journalism and make sure that if somebody looks at your Twitter feed, your LinkedIn account, or your Instagram profile, that they're really seeing the best of everything you do. And again, shout about it and be proud. Number 3, identify quality audiences. So it's okay to segment your audience. We all want to, have numbers that are as big as possible in lots of cases, but it's okay to pare that back and to look for specific audiences who you want to reach. Follow the data is number 4, to find these audiences and keep them. So make sure you listen to what your audience is saying, look at the numbers, make sure you reflect what they want to see on your feeds. And then finally, maximize your team's efficiency, because we only have so much time in the day to do all of this stuff, and there are only so many people to go around in every organization. So if you can find ways to spread your work across multiple platforms or make sure that something is seen more than once in a different way, then that's also very, very helpful in terms of achieving your goals. I hope all of that is useful, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and hopefully take some questions.
Let me unmute myself. Hi, Kevin, how are you? Thank you for this nice presentation. So we have indeed some questions for you. We have here one of Craig. I think the text in image is visually attractive when done right, but does this only apply for The Economist on Instagram, or does the text image visual get used across different platforms?
Okay, so we use these on LinkedIn and also on Facebook as well. We tend to use the same words in different places. So the image with the headline on Instagram may reflect the headline that we've used on a normal post on Facebook. But yes, there are ways to use headlines. It's a nice trick, because you can post for a second time in a day on Facebook. So you can have the traditional post, and then a few hours later you can use the same URL, because Facebook doesn't recognize it in the same way, and use the image with the headline on it to give yourself extra engagement. Twitter is a bit more difficult because of the way that images crop with the wide screen, and so sometimes you can have a bit of an awkward appearance.
Okay, thank you. And we have here one question from Francois Nel. So hello, Francois, nice to see you here as well. So Francois asks, which supplier do you use for social traffic data? Have insights from SM traffic shape the way journalists write, or do others reporters print a story for online SM?
Sure. So we use Socialflow and we use Later as our platforms for publishing. But we also have our own fantastic dashboards that our data analyst, as I mentioned, has built for us using Google Analytics and various other tools. We are not a newsroom that will respond necessarily to social media traffic. So we won't write an article, why is the sky blue, just because we think it will do very well for SEO. The Economist is very determined to set its own news agenda and to cover the subjects that we think are right. We do use data, though, to inform our decision-making across the audience engagement world. So if, for instance, we find that an article has performed very, very well in a newsletter overnight, does that give us some kind of indication as to whether we should be promoting it more on social? Or if we find that an article is taking off on Twitter or is generating a lot of subscriptions, does that mean that we should put it a bit higher on our website? So we do use data to inform our decisions, but our journalists are really writing the articles that they think they should be writing about and working as a team to really present the world in the best possible way every single week.
Thank you, Kevin. And we have time for one more question. This question is from Laura Oliver. What would you say is the single biggest thing you've done to maximize your team's efficiency?
I would say it would making sure that everybody is able to do a bit of everything. So this was something that we thought long and hard about at the start of the year when we thought that the pandemic was coming and that we might be working remotely. We wanted to make sure that if people fell ill or they couldn't work, that our team wouldn't fall apart because only one person knew how to do something on Instagram or only one person knew how to post a video or whatever. So we made sure that at the start of the year, everybody was able to do all of the basics across the team. We have specialists in certain areas, and we're really, really pleased that we do, because in normal times when everybody has plenty of time and resource, they can use those skills to great effect. But making sure that you are able to do all the basics, I think, is probably the single most important thing, because you don't then have one person writing for Facebook, one person for Twitter, one person for LinkedIn. You can do everything at once, get everything checked, produced very carefully, and then that person can even post the material as well.
So thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you for your time today, for your great presentation. You have so many questions, but unfortunately we don't have the time. But thank you so much for being here today. And Vera, back to you in the studio.
Thank you so much, Angela and Kevin, for that great presentation. I love Instagram myself, so I really enjoyed finding out what's behind managing great content and improving your presence on Instagram.